I'm no stranger to arcades. Growing up in the seaside town in the 90s, with a 10-minute commute ride to the arcades, my weekends were filled with light gun games such as Time Crisis or Virtua Cop, or side-scroll beat-em-ups such as The Simpsons or X-Men. But times have changed, and my old man yells at clouds saying, "It's not like this in my days." Arcades are now filled with mobile ported games, or games that are ported to from consoles, or games that have just changed from their original conception and just doesn't feel the same. One of those games that I dearly miss is a Konami game called Bishi Bashi. The concept was simple. It had 3 large buttons which, depending on the minigame, you'd have to hit the corresponding button. You could play against 2 other people and was made for a really fun minigame arcade. The game was actually ported to the PS1, but it really didn't feel the same without those large buttons from the arcade. Nor did they make a peripheral for the game. So what I'm building here is a DIY controller for the Bishi Bashi. This is future me. Before I get bombarded with comments, there is actually an arcade that houses a lot of retro games in the town centre, and it does actually have a copy of Bishi Bashi, but the place only opens 2 days a week for 2 hours, so I wouldn't count this one being a typical arcade. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, but more on that later. Starting off, I had to think of how I can encase everything and make the controller feel like it's meant for the game, and also not looking like a hideous thing. Firstly, I sketched the top case in Illustrator. This helped me make sure things were aligned correctly. I then printed it out and drew the template on a piece of cardboard. I then cut out all the necessary holes for the buttons. This will help me see how it feels before 3D printing. Once all the parts have been cut out, it was time for assembly. Now all the parts I used for this build can be found in the description below and can be easily sourced through online stores. Here I have 7 24mm buttons for navigation, and 3 big buttons are the action buttons for the game. I used a Bluetooth arcade board so you can take it wherever you want and not have to worry about wires when you're gaming. Once assembled, I've done the first round of testing, and yes, I am slow at this game. There were a few tweaks that I had to do before making the 3D model, which made things a lot easier when making a prototype beforehand, as you're able to feel what can be changed and what doesn't fit. In my opinion, I should probably have moved away from FreeCAD and used something like Fusion 360, but maybe I'll start that in the next build. Once the model was done, I printed out the parts, which I had to print in several pieces. I did run out of yellow filament, hence why there are some parts yellow and other parts black. I then sanded each part so the surface was flat and made it easier for the glue to adhere, and using a piece of tape to hold it together whilst it dried. Once it all dried, I came across this plastic welding tool. It essentially heats up a piece of metal for it to reinforce pieces of plastic together, almost like a stapler. But instead of the piece of metal bending around itself, this will melt the plastic around the metal. I found some of my previous prints separated as the glue wasn't strong enough. After clipping off the metal overhangs with my side cutters, and be extra careful and don't do what I did and got one lodged in my hand. There were still small points sticking up, so I used a Dremel to shave it down a bit more. It was not pretty by any means, but it was the underside, so I wasn't really that bothered about how it looked, but it did make the whole print a lot more strong and sturdy. So one of the things I didn't really account for was how the top piece and the base were going to be locked in. I ended up drilling a hole at the side of the case and melted in some threaded insert nuts, but this would definitely be revised in my final design. Now all I have to do is remove everything from the cardboard prototype and place them into my 3D printed case. And once everything was screwed in, I can now test it out in a new case. And it plays brilliantly, and just how I remember playing it. But as I said, there were a few things that needed to be revised before printing the final case. And this leads into the sponsor of this video, PCBWay. PCBWay has all your needs, everything from PCB assembly to CNC machining to what I use, 3D printing. The website is very simple to use. Just drag your STL files onto the web page, select the material. I went with PLA. From here you can pick the color, then select the quantity. Once you're ready, you can process the order to checkout. And from here, PCBWay had an expert team to review the file and report any defects if there are any issues with your print. And after about 2 weeks, 3 packages arrived at my doorstep. Unraveling it all, the first thing I thought was how much better the quality it is to my printer. Not only that, the print was printed in one piece, whereas I had to split the print in several pieces. The quality of the print was very impressive and the detail of the print was perfect. One of the things I didn't account for, as my print was in several pieces and didn't see this issue, but I did not give much room when placing the top case to the bottom case, so it is a very snug fit. You will need to use a flathead screwdriver to pry it open. Almost to the finish line, all I need to do now is remove everything from my 3D printed case to PCBWay's case. For the screw holes, I used some countersunk M4 screws to secure the case. But to be honest, the case was a tight fit. I doubt it can be removed that easily anyway. For the orange case, as you can see, I am using some light activated buttons. The Bluetooth arcade board only has 2 pins, which is for the buttons actions. To get the lights working as well, you would need this board which has 3 pins. The cables come in a daisy chain for the ground pin and would be connected to the next button. It will have an extra cable for the light and another for the button. For the big button, the pins are a lot larger, which meant I had to remove the smaller pins and crimp in some larger pins. And after a lot of tinkering, I was only able to get the green and the white buttons working, which felt a bit of wasted time. And as it's not a Bluetooth controller, I've just hung the cable with some cable tie on the case. But there are definitely some changes if I were to do it again. I think mainly it comes down to having those lights and have it working wirelessly, as Bishi Bashi is a game that is vibrant and is quirky, so having a controller be as vibrant and quirky is a must. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I have had building it. As I say, all the material including the case can be found in the description below. Last thing I want to say, I have reached over 1,000 subscribers. I am so happy that so many of you actually want to watch my videos, and it means a lot to me as I want to make so much more. I know this video has taken a while to come out and I can't promise the next one will be soon. But for now, thanks again for watching and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
Winner, computer.